Hi guys, Elle here. Today we're going to review one of my all-time favorite tarot decks, the Masonic Tarot. If you guys have seen my top 5 favorite tarot decks of all time, I'll put a link in the description below to it. This is the deck that made my top, my number 5 favorite deck of all time. And I am really actually quite excited to talk about it today because, we're working our way through the Living the Tarot series. We're more than halfway through. And this is a deck that really speaks to that. It talks a lot about the initiatory process in the major arcana. Now, it comes at things from a little bit more of a Masonic perspective. But, this is a deck that just takes a Masonic approach to the tarot. It's not like it's some sort of, Freemason deck with, a little bit of tarot symbolism in it. No, it's very much a classic tarot deck with a peppering of Masonic symbolism throughout. So it's very recognizable and very easy to work with. And on top of all these things that make it one of my favorite tarot decks, it's also really incredibly beautiful. The artwork is bright and happy and very vivid, and on whole it's a super positive feeling deck. Even the Devil card and the Tower and all that, and the Death card, there's nothing negative or depressing in this deck, and I love that. So this is a deck by a man named Jean Beauchard. And he says in his book, which I will show you in a second, that tarot and Freemasonry both carry a similar traditional thought, and that both participate in the evolution of the spirit of humanity. I love that direct quote. And in Freemasonry, you're working your degrees, and they're intimately entwined. I mean, Arthur Edward Waite himself was a Freemason, as well as being a part of the Golden Dawn, the Order of the Golden Dawn. But these, like we were talking about in the Living the Tarot series, all mystery schools have this same exact process of initiation. I mean, there's differences here and there, but more or less, it's the same process. It's natural. It's spiritual evolution, and that is exactly what is really focused on in this deck, and that is why I love it so much. In Freemasonry, you're working up your degrees. You're going from apprentice to journeyman to master mason, and that entire process is just what is being talked about in the major arcana of any tarot deck, and really what they pull, or what he pulls your focus to in the major arcana of the Masonic Tarot. The Masonic Tarot, or the Symbolic Masonic Tarot, by the way. It does seem to go by both names. But here, let me show you guys what you get when you buy this deck. It is currently out of print. It came out in 1987. Does it say the date there? Yeah, 1987. I'm not sure when this deck went out of print. I think it's been out of print for quite a while, but honestly, it's really not that hard to find. It's one of those decks you just gotta kind of keep your eyes peeled for on eBay. I see it up there all the time, at varying prices. I've personally seen it ranging anywhere from $30-$40 all the way up to over $100. I believe I spent $50 or $60 on it when I got mine a few years ago. Anyway, it is published by Grimaud in France, and it is a regular 78 card deck. You do get this is what the backs look like. I'll talk a little bit about the amazingness that is the backs of these cards in a second. These are the 2 extra cards you get. They are both in French, and just your basic, from the publisher info, some other decks they offer, and stuff like that. And this is the little white book that you get with this deck. It is available, or it is split up into 3 different languages. Can you see that? French, English, and German. So it's not a huge book, but it is way, way more elaborate and much bigger than your classic little white book. And although the English part is in the middle here, and it is only, let me actually figure out how many pages it is. That's where the English starts, and it ends somewhere around there. So it's literally, it's like less than a third of the book. But can I tell you guys, this is some powerful shit. Like, this is one of the most amazing books, I guess you could say, on the tarot. Like, I adore this little white book. It is so informative. And although it's not very long and not very extensive, what he talks about in here is just pure fucking brilliance. It's wonderful. And it is translated by someone else into English, so at times it's not the easiest thing to read, and it's not because he's using difficult language. I think there's just a little bit sort of lost in translation. Sometimes the endings of a word or something aren't quite as they should be, but it's only once in a while, and it certainly doesn't make it impossible to read or anything, but fair warning. So there's a little bit of history here, and then he goes into a little bit of history about Freemasonry and the tarot, and then this part is absolutely wonderful. He talks about, how, and this is something, if you study tarot, you've come across, tons and tons of times, I'm sure, but he divides the tarot up into like 3 sets of 7, or septenaries, and he titles the first 7 cards Interiorization, the second is Expiation, and the third, Expiation or Atonement, and the third is Redemption. So actually, you'll get a little bit of a sneak peek into what we're going to be talking about when we do part 3 of Living the Tarot, or Initiation in the Tarot videos, with this deck, because there's no avoiding it. It's what this deck is built on, and then he even goes into great detail here with this little chart down here. I don't know if the camera's doing this justice, sorry guys, but he separates each of the septenaries into, like, the first card of the septenary, the second card. So like the second card here would be the High Priestess, and number 9 the Hermit, and number 16 the Tower. And then it talks a little bit about what's going on in that level of the septenary. So if this is something that you've never really looked into in your tarot study, I think, there's lots and lots of different ways of splitting up the tarot and looking at the cards in conjunction to each other, from splitting it up into different ways. But the 7s and then the 3s like this are a great starting place. It's like some of the most, I think, important information that exists in the tarot. It has a lot to say when you look at the tarot in this way. It's really cool. But yeah, there's the rest of the chart there, 7, 14, and 21. You can really see when you look at it, like they're all sort of saying something. This is the Chariot, right? Number 7, 14 is Temperance, and 21 is the World. These are accomplishment cards, and seeing how they link together is a powerful way to study the tarot. It can be really enlightening. Okay, I'm done with my rant. Anyway, it goes on a little bit. What does he talk about here? The backs of the cards and stuff there. He talks about, and then you get a good page and an image of the card. Now, this isn't an actual image of the card. This was sort of shows the structure behind the card, because it's a Freemasonry deck, so how cool is that? Like the underlying images in the card are shown here, but it's very much still recognizable as the card when you're looking through. So he gives you a page on each of the major arcana, and it's absolutely brilliant. He goes through all 22 major arcana cards, and then he talks a little bit about the minors and the court cards and the suits, and then a little bit about some spreads and things like that. It's a great spread right there. And then it goes into German. But yeah, this book is key. Like, it'll blow your mind. It's a great book. Alright guys, let's jump into the deck. This is how I keep my Masonic Tarot. That's a little pin actually from Alex Gray from when I went to see his COSM exhibit in New York years ago. I think it fits really well here. Look at that. It's got, you know, the triangle and the eye and the sacred geometry stuff. I love it. It's one of the few decks I actually have it's backwards, that I have like a regular pin, you know, like one of those tack pins on, but I love this pin so much. It works. Okay, first of all, I want to show you guys how big the cards are, because they are very large. That is a standard size tarot card. It's one of the Centennial Rider-Waite-Smith cards. See there. It is, it's not much wider than Masonic Tarot, but it is, you know, a good chunk longer. The dimensions of the card, I believe, are 6 inches by 3 inches. So like I said, they're not super wide, but they are very long. It ends up being, of course, 3 and 3. You know, it's twice the width, and all this sort of geometric and structure and architecture is all just worked into the entire backs of these cards, really. Yeah, I'll come back to that in a sec. I have no problem shuffling the deck. Like I said, I don't have very large hands. They're definitely on the smaller side, but I can still riffle shuffle. The cards aren't super duper thick or anything, so they're very easy to bend and shuffle. But it's a good sturdy card stock. I would actually say it is really similar to the thickness of your Centennial Rider-Waite-Smith. Okay, so let's take a closer look at the amazing backs of these cards, actually. First of all, you can see that there is a border. There's a white border along the fronts and the backs of the cards. I'll show you the fronts in a second. But what's cool is literally the back image takes up the entirety of the back of the card. You can see it actually, the circle to complete itself here would literally go up to the end of the card. And here too, basically the backs are inscribed with 2 squares. That center line would run across the whole thing to create two separate squares, and then 3 circles, 1, 2, 3. Now that's already created some awesome sacred geometry stuff. It gives you your Vesica Pisces and all this cool stuff. And then what they've done is there's this divine proportion rectangle in here, and that darker, sort of stronger, thicker line or whatever. And then that's created, they've divided it into like a 7-rung ladder with its 7 central points going up the back of the card. So that's, you know, your 7 chakras, your even your 7 degrees, the ladder, the 7 steps of the ladder. And I'm not sure how to pronounce it, Kaddish Masonic degrees. Yeah, and then like I said, your divine proportion. It's even cool to flip over some of your cards and compare where like certain landmarks fall on the fronts of the cards, because they'll correspond to certain places on this 7-rung ladder. Yeah, the amount of time and energy and thought that was put into these cards is just psh, it's mind-blowing. It's amazing. Okay, so I did, just so you guys know, I did edge these cards myself. When you get them, or if you can get them new, they will be like a pure white border. I went over in like an antique gold kind of a finish. Yeah, and here is the Fool. So I decided to start with the Fool, even though in the ordering in the book, the Fool would be the 22nd card, so it would come after the World. I didn't get these cards new, so they were not in order when I got them, but I'm just going to continue like this since this is how I have been showing you most of the cards. We'll start with the Fool. And as you can see down here, the Hebrew correspondences are the same ones that I use from like the French occult tradition, as opposed to the English school of thought, which is used by most of the Golden Dawn and Aleister Crowley and the Thoth texts. And all that. So that is that just makes me so happy. Like this makes sense to me. And you'll see here too in the, right, it's that the Magician becomes Aleph. The Fool is not Aleph. In this system, usually Shin, which that letter is, becomes the Fool. If you guys saw my review of the Tarot of the Holy Light, Christine Payne Towler actually flip-flops those two. So not those two, but Tav or Tao sometimes becomes, or in her system becomes the Fool, and Shin is associated with the world, which I find just so fascinating. I sort of flip-flop the two in my head. I like it this way, I like it her way. The only thing I just cannot sort of get down with is, you know, Aleph for the Fool and Beth for the Magician. It just... I'll do another video talking about it maybe. It doesn't make sense to me. I'm not trying to be insulting. If that is what you follow and that makes sense to you, that's fantastic. You know, use what makes sense to you. So anyway, this is the Fool. And look at those colors, like, oh my God. So, I mean, right off the bat, you can see that this really does look like sort of like what we talked about with the backs of the cards here, right? You can see the golden mean expressed over and over and over again, and even this beautiful spiral, this wonderful like Fibonacci sort of sacred geometry thing. Over here, you see the word folia too, Folia. Which has to do with, there's a geometric, you know, loop-de-loop sort of associated with that. I even like to think of it as, because the word folia has a lot of associations with music and with dance and all this kind of stuff. He doesn't write about this in his book, even that the word, he doesn't even give you a meaning for the word at all. But I like to think of it as the spiral dance. You know, it's that eternal return, the Fool's never-ending journey. And I think that is just expressed brilliantly on this card, isn't it? So the Fool is actually unnumbered. All of your titles will be down here in French first, and then in English underneath, with your Hebrew correspondence over here. And then what's over here, Jean Beauchard does not really talk about this in his book either, but what these are is basically it's a Masonic alphabet, and you'll find it in all the major arcana cards, wherever you have a Hebrew association. And it's not something I'm super familiar with. I just sort of know it exists, and that's what it looks like. But I believe, if I'm correct, that the sound that's associated with the Hebrew letter, which you might be more familiar with, is the same sound that this Masonic pseudo alphabet is getting at, I believe. But that's what that is in the other corner down there. Okay, so I am going to spend a little bit more time talking about the major arcana cards again, and then I'll go through pretty quickly the minor arcana, because they're beautiful pip cards, but they're basically pip cards. So I'm going to take the time to really just go through this amazing deck with you guys, because it's so special. So for each of the major arcana cards too, Mr. Beauchard, or Monsieur Beauchard, has like a title almost associated with each one. And for the Fool, it's without reference, which I'll explain. So he even has a quote associated with this card, a Rumi quote that I really quite like. I want to share it with you. It's quick. Liberated I live, beyond that which is allowed, drunkenness itself being my only possibility. So really what's happening here in this depiction of the Fool card anyway is it's the walk or the passage, sorry, get on camera, the walk or the passage of the Fool or the soul from one universe to another universe. You know, a universe of completely different perception, of different sensations. He even gets at the idea, you know, is the Fool madness or is the Fool wisdom? And really it's just a difference in your perspective. It's excuse me, you know, the only difference is a difference in your point of view, which is so excuse me, which is so clearly expressed in the turning of the Fool upside down, and all that, you know. The card's all about like this displacement, a displacement in time, even a movement, and the letter Shin down here, even as he says in his book, it sort of reinforces that notion of displacement, of spatial movement. You know, the Fool can show up at any point in the entire path of the major arcana. He can be displaced anywhere. He can intervene at any moment, you know, not having any sort of coordination to himself. He's situated outside of all reference points. To go back to that quote, to go back to that title, without reference. It's a wonderful way to look at the Fool card. So sort of like for me how in the Marielle deck it was the Magician that first sucked me in because of its beauty and how different it was. And this is happens to be the same card, the Magician card, that really did it for me with this deck. As amazing as that Fool card was, the Magician is just such a unique interpretation of a Magician card. It's unreal. I mean, look at him or her. It's not really doesn't really have a sex either. So the Magician card, he says, represents, alchemically speaking, he does reference other spiritual ways of thinking, especially alchemy, because it's so closely linked with Freemasonry, and they're all so much a part of the tarot, and Kabbalah and all these things. But he says it is like the prima materia, that rough raw material, which carries within it, that potential for gold, or gold really being another way of saying, a more perfected state of being, or a more pure state of being. So he even says it's like the uninitiated, who come knocking at the door of the temple, seeking the 4 elements, or the 4 elements of the tarot even. Or how they correspond to the 4 elements of the tarot: earth, air, fire, water, swords, cups, coins, and I forgot one, wands. But seeking the 4 elements of the tarot, which will allow him to grow in his own potential qualities. Starting to get that plant reference. It's literally like the Magician is a plant growing, his head opening up to spirit, or blossoming, or flowering to sun, to spirit. You see all the 4 elements on the cards here, and he's even rooted into the earth still. He's still rooted to earth and to water, deeply rooted. He's faceless, though. Can you see that? He's faceless. His inner eye, if you will, is still indifferent. It can't exist by itself just yet. And I even love how, and he talks about this, how everything is, or mostly green. He is literally green. He's the color of nature. He's the color that exists in the middle of the spectrum, the color that exists at the heart chakra, right in the middle of everything, which is where he's existing. So he's literally a plant himself, He's blooming, like we said. He's searching himself. He's regenerating. The title of the card, even in the little white book, is The Initial Cause. So good. Can you even see? Look at this on the hilt of his sword there. There's like a caduceus. These cards are kind of big. I feel like I have to hold them a little further away. I'm going to try and do a zoom in on each one. Look at that down there. Even have all the alchemical symbols for the elements on there. Good. And then you do see how the other card didn't have a number. This the Fool didn't have a number. Number 1 is down here, right in front of the title in French, and then the the title of the card in English, right below it. Okay, on to another stunning card. Look at this. This is the High Priestess. Have you ever seen the High Priestess looking like this? It's such a cool, different interpretation, man. So the High Priestess is all about duality, which is the title of this card. The one and its reflection. Look at her back there. She's inviting you to return to yourself. She's the guardian of the temple, or the guardian of the entrance to the temple. That frontier between the conscious and the subconscious. The whole card is the principle of duality. Everywhere you look, you'll see, pairs of opposites, the floor, the pillars, the sun and the moon, like, look at the compass up there. Now, this down here, take a look there. You can't see the whole thing. However, it's obvious what the word is. It's vitriol, and it's a very famous Masonic motto and an alchemical motto. So vitriol by itself, without the periods, what do you call it? It's an acronym here, but without the being an acronym, it's a word in itself, and it means, or it's an old way, I guess, of saying sulfuric acid. Now, sulfuric acid is fascinating in alchemy because it's an acid that can dissolve kind of all metals in some way, except for gold. So, in gold, it has absolutely zero effect. And then in that way, sulfuric acid is used to create the Philosopher's Stone, the end result. That's sort of what we were talking about when we talked about the alchemical tarot, the Robert M. Place deck, and we were looking at the strength card with that green lion. That was what was being symbolized by that poisonous green lion, the sulfuric acid. So anyway, vitriol as an acronym stands for, oh God, please don't, I'm sure I'm going to butcher it. In Latin, it's Visita Interiora Terrae Rectificando Envies Occultum Lapidem. I'm sure that was terrible. But anyway, what it translates to is visit the interior of the earth, and rectifying or purifying, you will find the hidden stone. Oh my God, that's what's going on down here. Crazy. Yeah, think on that. Isn't that such a powerful statement? I love that. It has to do with, what we said before. She's inviting you to return to yourself, into your subconscious. Find that hidden stone. Anyway, she shows, equilibrium. She shows that the equilibrium is in constant tension, that push and pull between the two forces. You have the black and white mosaic floor and all these other pairs of opposites everywhere, telling you that you must adapt to these rules before entering the temple. And you do that work here. This room here is what's known as the chamber of meditation, and it's a thing. It's a step in Masonic initiation, the chamber of meditation. Next, we have the beautiful Empress at number 3, and she's titled the Understanding. Now, this entire card the imagery of this card is constructed on triangles, a combination of triangles and trinities of symbols, which unite the active and the passive symbols with their catalyzer, as he calls it. It's, mother, father, and child. The Holy Trinity. You can see the Holy Trinity of alchemy right here in your sulfur, mercury, and salt. And then you see what's happening Masonically right down here with your square, your compass, and your book right here, which is also called the tradition, or the volume of the sacred law, that book right there. And that's sort of what's happening in this card on a whole. It's the discovery by the apprentice of these 3 greater lights, as they are called in Freemasonry. Excuse me. There's just so much cool symbolism on this card, though. If you look around her, she's in the middle of a circle of 12 stars, which is, that's what you find in the Rider-Waite-Smith card, right? I think she wears a crown of 12 stars representing the signs of the zodiac. Her head or her hair looks like the sun almost, and she's standing, or has one foot on a crescent moon down here. Ugh. Just beautiful. But when you look in the book, too, at the picture of this card, or what's sort of the basis for this card, you can see even more clearly how everything is triangles. It's amazing from the inside out. even the attention to little things like this. If you look at the border here, it's not gold like you find in, I don't know if you can see it, in the rest of the cards of the major arcana. The gold here has been moved to the interior of the card. I mean, there's symbolism in every little thing that is done with this deck. From the color to the geometry to the architecture, the symbols, just everything is so intentional with this deck. It's kind of mind-blowing. So here in the Emperor card, the initiate comes to Solomon and he executes his work. The interior world is constructed on a solid basis. The square here, the solid basis is the square. It's his throne. It is his house. For the Freemason, it's his lodge. It's man in his interior temple. Solid. The square stone, its dimensions unite the infinitely small with the infinitely big. Even the colors of this card on whole, evoke the fire of the Athanor, or that alchemical oven, another thing we talked about in the Alchemical Tarot review. You've still got your eagle back there. You still got a lot of classic symbolism going on here. You have, sitting on his cubicle throne. I love that he's in an egg. There's so much to be said about that. You have the eye watching the triangle up top. If I were to talk about every single symbol on these cards, we would be here all day. It's so much fun. He doesn't even go into too much detail about every symbol on the card in the book. That is why this deck is so much fun. It will keep you busy for hours and years, lifetime. But this card, expresses control over oneself. And, it's also the active reply to the Empress card, the preceding card, and her receptivity. Emperor. This is the Hierophant. Check him out. Isn't that gorgeous? So as the other preceding cards here were based on first the triangle and then the cube, here we are based on the pentagon, or the pentacle, or the star. And what's happening here is this card is the in Masonic initiation, the consecration of the working tools. So the figure here also is in relationship to the golden mean, the ratio of harmony, which allows the building of the spiral. It unites the point with the infinite. So the Hierophant here is the intermediary between the point and the infinite, or between earth and heaven. Excuse me. It represents the power to accomplish things. And when you're talking about the consecration of the working tools, that's the means by which you accomplish action, the means of action, your working tools. Everything is a metaphor. Yeah, he's even got his triple crown up here, like you classically see, his triple staff. The material, the sensitive, and the spiritual, all united. Consecrate those working tools. The Hierophant. And that brings us to the Lovers card, number 6. It is also titled Orientation in this deck. All these titles are just in the little white book, guys. They're not on the card anywhere. The initiate leaves the school where he was attempting to unite with his individual self, and he finds himself here at the crossing of two triangles, which form the seal of Solomon. And this is where the initiate will be obliged to make a choice, here at the junction of day and night. Beauchard says of the Lover's card that it's all about to be and to know the symbolism of the union of opposites. Yeah, everywhere all over this card, really, you see this symbolism of the union of opposites. But it's here at this junction, you could say, of day and night that the initiate has to make a choice about his life or her life. You know, on one side you have passivity, and on the other side is a rigorous life filled with dedication to the pursuit of the research of the light. You know, he says in his book it can also represent the choice between the way of intuition, or the more mystical path, and that of a more Gnostic path, or a path of study. Also up here, this arrow of Sagittarius is really a symbol of intuition. Just sort of like lightning can be a symbol of the same thing. You know, that arrow shot by Eros, normally on the Lovers card, is animated by the sentiments of love and desire and generosity. And I love this down here. He's got a level. You know, it's a tool of the Masons, right? And it allows control over balance, which is very necessary at this stage. Yeah, it's just an amazing Lovers card. I love that it's not so clearly like a marriage taking place. It's something different. It makes you look at it differently. And on to the Chariot. First off, I love the color gradation on this card. How beautiful is that? I love that they're standing again on that green color like we talked about. You know, that middle color, that middle ground that divides in the center. But yeah, the initiate, or the hero, or the baby Mason, if you will, is assured of his choice that he made in the previous Lover's card. He now possesses a certain degree of control over himself. He is perfectly stable on this cube right here that he stands on, and he is being guided by shadow and light, or his conscious and his unconscious, being interlaced here. The title of this card is the Mastership, the Chariot. And that brings us to one of my all-time favorite tarot cards, the Justice card. Justice is 8 here, obviously, not 11 like in the Rider-Waite-Smith deck. Also, we've moved on to the second septenary with this Justice card, the expiation process. So we talked about with this card how justice is the opening from self to others. You know, like even says the people down here at the bottom, they represent like laws and or statute laws, I should say, but not necessarily real justice. These are like human laws down here. You know, the real justice up here sort of rises above all that. And even this up here, this is an opening, or the opening of a pomegranate with like seeds sort of tumbling out that are being weighed down here almost. But that's what that represents up there. That's a pomegranate. And that represents maturity too. You know, rises up with her maturity over silliness, I guess you could say. Beauchard says that balance signifies for the individual the necessity of equilibrium between internal and external lives. Intelligence and intuition must harmonize with action. I know, so good. Also, 8 here is the number of like cosmic equilibrium, the 8 directions of the universe over which justice exerts her universality. And, you know, after the period of becoming aware conscientiously for the initiate, then starts the work on yourself, on oneself. Next up, we have the beautiful Hermit card. Look at that. Now, the Hermit symbolizes, like solitary work and work done in secret. It's the light under the veil of secrecy. He carries this ivory key with him, which is sort of like an open sesame to the world of the interior, to your inner self. Here, the dragon is his guide in the world of the depths, or the underworld. And he's also, everything happens under the sign of Saturn up here, which is also a symbol of the meditative type of work that you're doing. It's even card number 9, of course, which can have a lot to do with gestation and immortality. You also see up here something I love. It's that Freemason's magic square where you have all the numbers from like 1 to 9 in every row, or and everything all adds up to 15. They all add up to the same number. That's a field of study in and of itself. Those magic squares are so cool. But yep, that's the Hermit. Here is your amazing Wheel of Fortune card. You can also see the 10 Sephiroth in there. How beautiful is that? So this card is all about, the law of cyclic evolution. Its subtitle is Patience and Perseverance. The wheel is more of a spiral here, and it represents the law of cyclic evolution. In the center, there they are, you see something that looks sort of like a Shiva Shakti kind of union. They're dancing, or mating. And it represents that dancing or that mating of the two people within you, your two halves. It's also from this fixed spot, or this fixed point in the center of the wheel, that you find a stable and a productive place or way of life. Also, like I said, you have the 10 Sephiroth represented here. And I just thought it was also interesting that in Freemasonry there are 10, the same number of Sephiroth, there's 10 passages that the Knight of the Royal Arch must go through. The Royal Arch being, I guess you'd call it like a type of Freemasonry. But he must pass through 10 of these passages before he discovers the jewel, so to speak. Wheel of Fortune. All under the eye of Keter. I know. So good. Here is the beautiful Strength, or Fortitude card, I should say. It's actually called Fortitude. Check that out. Oh my god. So he subtitles this card Serenity, which is a beautiful title for this card. He says the only real fortitude is the fortitude of the soul. And he says the force from the Wheel of Fortune card expresses itself here with serenity. Beautiful way to look at things. And my favorite part about this card actually is how he utilizes these columns. Since it's a Masonic deck, utilizing things from Greek architecture to represent different things, I think is just friggin' amazing. And I mean, they do. These different columns symbolize different things, or different style columns in Greek architecture symbolize different things. So here he shows 2 different types of columns, and he talks about this in his book. There's the Doric column, which is this pinkish, almost colored column here, and then an Ionic column, as it's known, right there next to it. You can actually see Doric columns. The pink ones are what you see when you look at the Parthenon. And then the Ionic are the ones you see sort of at the entrance to the Parthenon. It's cool to see the different ones. Anyway, the stillness, he says, the stillness evoked by the Doric column, the pink column, combines with the harmony evoked by the Ionic column, which is associated with strength and wisdom and beauty. And I just love how the woman on the Strength card literally is a column. Look at that. She is a column herself. And it's like it awakens this column of energy within herself that you see represented, the plant blooming or growing from the earth, which awakens her kundalini and her chakras, and then it blooms and explodes at the top of her head. How glorious is that? Just like we sort of talked about before in the Magician card, how he's like a plant himself. And then she's, controlling the lion, like you see on your classic Strength cards. Beauchard says, it It is told to the sublime Mason that he has to subdue the lion, the guardian of the arch, to oblige him to remit the key, or the key of knowledge, really. Yeah, fortitude. Ooh, on to the Hanged Man. So the title associated with this card actually is Sirasana, having to do with that yoga pose, the asana of the headstand. How perfect is that? But anyway, the Hanged Man has to do with passing from one world into another. And this new world is based on perception, and it's just as real as the world that our senses are used to now. Excuse me, he plunges into this new world with his hands tied behind his back, without any possible recourse, held only by his ankle to the material world, represented by the signs of the zodiac all around this card. You even have that classic, 6 chopped branches on each side, totaling 12, the Hanged Man, number 12. From his pockets here falls those last bits of attachment that he has to the material world. His desires are falling out and leaving behind. It's interesting, too, when he talks about this in the book, how he references a couple myths that have to do with the Hanged Man, how, like, Oedipus was suspended by his heel to a green tree, and how Achilles even was plunged headfirst into a bath of immortality, remaining in contact with the material world by only his heel, his Achilles heel. He even talks about how the Hebrew letter lamed is change by movement in space. I mean, it's really all about a change of state, a change of state and spirit. And then, love this. Up here, I had to look this one up. I had no idea what this was referring to. It's hard to see on my card. It's actually LDP. It's a little bit easier to see in person because it got scraped off or something. But this has to do with like the 15th degree in Masonry it's associated with. But it stands for, I don't know if it's in French or what language, or Latin or something. Basically, it translates to liberty of passage. Or really liberty of thought, and it has to do with how one must have the liberty and the freedom to move and to think in both body and mind. Even all these little things thrown on here, man, they're so good. And on to our death card. Now, this card does not have a name on it or a title, just like your classic Marseille decks. It is only numbered, number 13. Look at that labyrinth down there. And you still have a lot of your classic symbolism, the head, the hands, the death figure with the scythe. Even holding it the same way as they do on the Marseille decks, right? If you look closely, you can see he's even riding like a skeletal horse, the angel of death here. How great. The extra title given to this card here is Separation. How good is that? And of course, death only changes the scenery. Death is just a change in scenery. And then you see the Reaper, or the angel of death here, separating the being from his attachments with the outside world, with the world of appearances, just like we talked about in our Living the Tarot series, and how that's represented by the hands and the heads left down here, the senses that he's being separated from. Death liberates these structures. The card is, there's a lot of green there, but there's also a lot of black. He talks about his usage of black here and how it is also the color of the first alchemical work or process. And that we talked about in our alchemical tarot review too. He utilizes the blackening phase, the negredo, right? But black is also the void, the nothingness, And then he even talks about mem here, the Hebrew letter mem. It's that mother letter, but it represents matter and the matrix and trial and all those things. So in this system, which just works so perfectly for me, it fits real well. Death. And next we have the beautiful Temperance. Oh, I love this card. Beautiful, right? So the title given for this card is Integration. And you know, finishing the second septenary is when one is leaving behind that structural work or the basic achievement. This is when a bit of rest really is needed to, as he puts it, situate the currents in their proper place. And that's, you know, like we talked about living the tarot again, that's what's happening here. These in the cups here, there's a circulation of vital fluids happening. This is your kundalini, very similar to what you see in the symbol of Aquarius with the cups. And I even love how he talks about how noun, however you want to pronounce it, the Hebrew letter, is associated with the notion of breath. And that's exactly why I love that association with temperance, because that's really what controls these vital currents, these vital fluids, right? All right, so we're going to start with the third septenary here. If you've been watching Living the Tarot, I guess we're sort of jumping ahead here with this deck just a little bit, but there'll be lots more info in that video to come. Anyway, the other title of this card, according to Jean Beauchard, is Going Beyond the Ego. Now, nature has its laws. One does not master it without respecting it. Love that. So there's a lot of associations here with the dragon as a reservoir of vitality and impulse and unconscious impulses is what the dragon can symbolize. He even talks about how the Hebrew letter Samek has its sort of hieroglyphic origins from the shape of like a fire serpent. Isn't that neat? Yeah, and then this red color here symbolizes these impulses that's represented by the dragons or the serpents. It's that fight against the blackness, which is here representative of all that is obscure and that fear of the insensible. You know, here at the beginning of the third septenary, you're being led to a realization and a mastery of your impulses. It's what he calls an achievement in red, or the achievement in red. I love that you see this fire down here, sort of in two directions almost. It's going towards the interior and the exterior, referencing how we fear penetrating into our unconscious. So this devil, he's a useful demon, and it's our obligation, he says, to recognize that. The devil. And here's the Tower. And the title of this card is Deviation and the Illusion of Liberty. So the Tower has to do with the risk of wanting to elevate oneself beyond one's possibilities. He also talks about the idea of the interior temple of the builder, which is, your inner spiritual self, that which you've been working to build thus far through the major arcana. And here in the card you see how, like, this temple, this tower, will either be destroyed by the lightning, or it'll be protected by it. And he says, if man fixes and limits his thoughts on the solutions of his daily and social problems, he destroys or he separates it from his profound being. But if he searches the harmony of the cosmos, leaving aside vanity and pride, he will participate in the awakening of his faculties, especially the Ajna chakra, the pineal gland, that third eye, right? And he says that the cube up here represents or symbolizes that top chamber, our brain, our heads, where the third eye and pineal glands reside. It's that place which allows us to master all situations. That protected cube up there. Isn't that great? And then this guy down here, this triangle or pyramid, talks about it in the little white book, and he says, after the destruction of Babel, they say that the architect Phaleg retired to a triangular temple, there to meditate until the time of his redemption. That's what that guy's all about down there. Isn't that beautiful? He even mentions the letter, the Hebrew letter ayin here, and says it has to do with, and it does, in my opinion as well, the fall or the separation of forces. So good. And on to the star. The star is also called the guide, and he says, truth is naked in order to differentiate it from all the masks. Talking about why the woman on the star card is naked. And he says, hope dwells in the man who looks at Venus, the star of the shepherd, the first to shine in the evening and the last in the sky at dawn. The night is no longer obscure. The body is aspired and does not offer hindrance to the actions of the spirit. Yep, that's where you are, the star card. How great is that? He says there's starry dust, as he calls it. What's being poured out from her vessels here is the dew of spring, which also for the alchemist becomes that dissolvent agent of matter. There's another circulation happening here, just like we saw in the Temperance card. The star. And here is the beautiful moon card. Look at that. Zoom out a little bit here. Oh, I know. So the other title for this card is Mediation. And he offers a quote from the Yi King. He says, birth is a breakthrough after a lengthy resolution. Now he also talks about how the moon represents, of course, the mother, the matrix, and how a child at its birth discovers the exterior world at first through the mother, and how through her he will perceive the father or the son. And he references like how in Greek mythology, Artemis, the moon, is born first and helps her twin's arrival into the world. She helps him be born, Apollo, the sun. The moon is a mirror which hides its real nature. The moon represents the unconscious, and it represents for the Freemason the productive force, the mediator principle, the mother who transmits life. The moon. And there is your sun card. Look at the colors in this card. Oh my god. So here the moon or the mother disappears and lets the son or the father appear as the active and productive principle. The title of this card is Illumination. It's the source, it's the carrier of light in its absolute, its spirit, and it's the intelligence of the world. The 19th letter, Kaf, down here, represents that creative power, the eye. He warns, be careful, you can't reach the light or the supreme knowledge, except after a long time and with a difficult preparation. This is where Icarus burnt his wings. But the verb or the logos or the om is associated with the light, and it represents itself through the chakra at the top of the head, which opens your consciousness to the sun and its perfect and direct intuition, to its harmony, to the image of pure love, the sun. Check out this Judgment card. There you see that ladder that we talked about on the backs of the cards there too. And you have an Ouroboros. So Judgment represents resurrection under the influence of the sun, and the possibility of redemption, and redemption being the alternate title for this card. The letter down here, the Hebrew letter Resh, symbolizes the idea that the idea of the created one who receives in him the creator. You know, that's why you see the circle and the triangle here. You know, the created, the triangle, receives the creator, the circle. And the sound of divine trumpets shakes up the material structure. And he says the awakening of the dead signifies the sublimation of matter through the spiritual influence. Love it! And the tree of life carries the sap, and the Ouroboros, we saw up here, is a symbol of immortality, but also of the judgment of oneself. Here in this ladder of 7 steps, I think you also find the idea of like connecting heaven and earth. You know, it's this golden ladder of 7 steps that can unite the 2 planes or the 2 levels. Man is no longer separated from his paradise. He can freely move there, you know, once you've taken charge of yourself, you know. And onto the world card. Let me zoom in on this guy. There's a lot going on here. Oh, look at that bird up there. I love him. So here in the world card, you know, here at the end, the individual discovers the end purpose of his search, or the ideal place. It is built on the 4 symbols that we already talked about in the Magician card, the 4 elements, but here they've been like spiritually transformed, and you have, you know, the 4 fixed signs of the zodiac. You can even look at them as like the apostles or the evangelists. But it's the 4 elements of the Magician now spiritualized, transformed. The card shows, you know, in harmony all of your previous efforts which were carried out. And all the steps which led to this are symbolized in the equilibrium that you've attained, you know, and how you're now supported by those cosmic principles. Isn't that wonderful? The thought and attention to detail that has gone into these cards is just, yeah. He's even got that like Da Vinci Vitruvian Man thing. He's like in perfect harmony. And the title of the world card is Sublimation and Perfection. So good. So that pretty much wraps up our tour of the major arcana. So I am just going to go through pretty quickly and show you guys all the minor arcana cards, because they are basically pips, but there's beautiful artwork on every single one. I mean, look at this ace. You have your Masonic tools down there. You have a wand like just flowering with symbols of the chakras going up. I mean, come on. Just amazing. And this entire minor arcana is what I like to call color-coded. All of the wands here have this sort of reddish or purplish, maroony kind of color to it. More red than anything, I'd say. And the, what is it? Oh, the cups are dark blue. The swords are sky blue. And the coins he calls ochre. They're kind of like a yellowish, brownish, almost golden kind of color. I don't know if you guys have noticed too, as I've been going through this gold color on here. It isn't like a metallic thing really, but it does reflect the light a little bit differently than the other colors. It's not really like an inlay or anything like that, but it has this really cool way of popping out at you. The gold, it is a little bit more metallic than the other colors, I guess you could say. Look at that. I love the way he has the 9 arranged. Isn't that great? And there's all these great symbols in the corners and stuff. 10 of Wands. And this is what your courts look like. They are pages, knights, queens, and kings. There's a page. Your knights are still all on horseback. I like how they're facing other directions. Old Marseille decks. And there is, whoops, I got my king and queen mixed up, but that's okay. There is your queen. Is she great? They have like just as much detail as the major arcana cards. And even though these are pips too, the minors here, They're still, look at that, especially the aces are just super detailed. I love those hand cups. They're so trippy and occult feeling. Love it. And he's got his square down there. One more hand cup. He also calls them base colors, not color-coded suits, but it's the same thing. His base colors. But dark blue here in the cups. So even though in this deck the wands are associated with fire and the swords are still associated with air, in his book, and you can change things up and do things however you like, of course, but I think it's really interesting. He sort of has flip-flopped the ideas behind the swords and behind the wands. So really the coins in this tarot symbolize not just the body, but, you know, physical, the body stuff, all the stuff we associate with earth. And then his actions are associated with swords, sentiments and feelings with cups, and intellect with wands. See what I mean? There's a little bit of a flip-flop there. He's also got, I think, a really interesting way of looking at the courts. Here's another court. Look at that page. Their faces are so cool. They're so peaceful. So for him, the knaves, or the pages, excuse me, they're passive, and they announce present things, present matters, you know, and they possess an unexploited potential force, he says. It's the period of the awakening of the consciousness of the apprentice Freemason during the period of observation. It's your Ace of Swords. And then he says knights are active and mobile, and they represent the time that things are put into their place, and or those of ideas, and they correspond to the action of the fellowcraft in the lodge. It's your Four of Swords. And then for queens and kings, he says that they form couples, and that they are completely in the know of things and concepts. Just wanted to share that with you. I thought that was a very interesting way to look at the courts. Isn't the color he chose for the swords absolutely beautiful? It's like it really is like a sky blue. Nine of Swords. And your 10. And here is your Court of Swords. Here is your page or knave. Kind of goes back and forth, knave and page. I never really noticed that. How have I not noticed that? Here's your knight. And then he even goes on to talk a little bit more about the queens and kings here. He says queens are the feminine principle, of course, and represent fertility to a great extent. You know, this is the creation, a slow gestation, quietly with wisdom. That's your queen. That's your king. That's your Ace of Coins. Oh, I love the aces. And then kings, he says, are the ones who are the builders and the dominators. You know, they represent the principle of force itself. Isn't that the sacred geometry on these minors? Just simple and beautiful. Look at that. So he talks about how the courts really, they represent a quaternary that puts into play a combination of principles and of states which concern human nature in its different aspects and in all its multiple possibilities. Love the way he looks at the court cards. I'm telling you, if you can't even find this deck, but you can get your hands on his little white book, it's absolutely, absolutely wonderful. Your Eight of Coins. See what I mean about the color here? It's like yellow, orangey, almost brownish feeling, kind of. Like I said, he calls it ochre. Very golden feeling. He's on fire. And then here are our last court cards here. Here is your Knave of Coins. Hello, Knave. Here is your Knight of Coins. I love him. Your beautiful Queen. And your King. King of Coins. And back to our amazing Fool. Okay, guys, isn't this deck freaking amazing? I love it so much. It takes a little bit for me to get my hands wrapped from beginning to end here. So I sort of just have to go like that and pick them up and push them together. I can't do a regular riffle shuffle with it. Of course, I dropped a card there. But anyway, you can still riffle them because they bend amazingly. And then, of course, you could do an overhand shuffle this way. I don't think I can do it this way. I kind of can just make it. It's way more comfortable long ways because the cards are so wide. But yeah, it works. It works. So that is your deck. That is your amazing little white book. And that is the box everything comes in. Yay! Thanks so much for watching, guys. I'll catch you next time. Bye.